Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry for the technical problems. Like everything went fine during the rehearsal, but life events. But hey, I was about to start off by saying hi from Finland. We had our first snow today in Tampere, Finland. And even though I've lived here for 13 years, it's still a nice surprise to see snow for the first time every winter. Well, 13 years may sound like a long time, but I've also been a resident in 3 other countries throughout my life. And I have family scattered across 3 continents, and that includes my immediate family. So I know something about distributed families and communities, and the fun and challenges we face. Thanks to the organizers of Open Source Automation Days for having me. My name is Carol Chen, and welcome to my session on distributed community in the virtual world, connected or disconnected. Oh, by the way, this is not a technical talk, even though I'm listed in the technology track, and I just wanted to mention it to set the right expectations. Okay, let's start with a brief self-intro. I did my graduate studies in computer science in the United States and started my career at Nokia in Dallas, Texas. I took Nokia's slogan of connecting people to heart and began to participate and organize events in the local tech and open source community here in Tampere, Finland. First, as a way to get to know people when I moved here, but also seeing the rewarding connections and relationships that are born from such events. When I joined Red Hat, at first I was supporting the Managed IQ community. 2 years ago, I became part of the Ansible community team and have been focusing on outreach efforts for the Ansible community since then. As mentioned earlier, I've lived in 4 countries across 3 continents, and I've visited more than 40 countries thanks to my job as well as a personal love for travel and exploration. I've been to Munich twice and hope I'll have a chance to visit again in the near future. Feel free to connect with me in some of these channels with the ID SciBat. Here's a map of the Ansible community, which consists of Ansible meetup groups, as well as Ansible contributors around the world. The data is gathered from GitHub and meetup.com APIs. While there are some hotspots where people gather, you can see that we have contributors in 6 continents and local meetup groups in 5. By nature, our community is distributed to begin with. We communicate mainly through mailing lists and IRC channels, and I'm aware of many community-driven online user groups in various languages as well. Ansible Munich meetup group is, by the way, fairly active, and my last trip to Munich was actually to attend a meetup there. We just had a contributor summit last week along with Ansible Fest. Now, the Ansible Contributor Summit is the event for those who contribute to the Ansible project or have a desire to do so. It is a full day or possibly days of working sessions, especially for community contributors to interact with one another, as well as with Ansible development teams, such as the core team, AWX, Galaxy, and so on. At the summit, we discussed important issues affecting the Ansible contributor community to help shape the future of Ansible, with a focus on improving collaboration with our contributors. The wiki page here links to the meeting minutes and logs from the previous contributor summits, as well as video recordings from the most recent ones. I'm still working through the 16 hours of recordings from last week and a total of 13.6 gigabytes worth of content. Here's a list of the Ansible Contributor Summits that occurred between 2017 and 2020. This is where, if I were giving this talk in person, I usually do a show of hands to see who has been to some of these previous Contributor Summits. Of course, with a virtual event, I could still perhaps do a poll or ask you to add a comment in chat. But I do miss the interactive nature of live presentations in person. However, even though our Contributor Summits have been face-to-face events prior to this year, we have always had included a virtual component to allow participation from those who cannot attend in person. But the last time we had a physical summit outside of the United States was in June 2017. Thus, while it is possible for contributors in other parts of the world to join virtually, oftentimes the time differences means that they cannot participate in the event in its entirety. Since we have a sizable group of contributors in Europe, we decided at the Atlanta's Ansible Fest that my next major task was to plan the Contributor Summit somewhere in Europe in the first half of 2020, independently of the Ansible Fest. We also set our sights to move even further east, but one step at a time. This is a graph that sums up the bunch of text in the previous slide. Yeah, I'm not that great with diagrams or design of visual aids, but it is just to highlight that we went from having Contributor Summits once or twice a year, depending on Ansible Fest, to 3 times this year after going fully virtual, thanks to the pandemic. There are definitely a lot of advantages with online events. In many ways, it is easier to put together than a physical event. Let's backtrack a little and take a look at what could have been. I started sourcing for potential locations already late last year, as organizing such an event has a pretty long lead time, securing venues and catering, ordering and shipping swag, and more. Plus, I was really excited to bring Contributor Summit back to Europe, where I am based. Although we were not attached to Ansible Fest for this iteration, we thought about co-locating with another relevant event for mutual support and exposure. After considering several great conferences, including OSAD, which was unfortunately not in the time frame we were aiming for earlier in the year, we decided upon FOSS North, a notable free and open source event in Northern Europe, hosted in Gothenburg, Sweden. I tried to confirm all the details as early as possible in the beginning of the year so that our community contributors could make plans to attend, as well as to arrange travel. For once, it seemed that most things are on schedule and going according to plan. And then COVID-19 hits. In the beginning of February at FOSDEM and Config Management Camp, we started hearing about the coronavirus being spread outside of Asia. There was a slight unease as FOSDEM attracted thousands of attendees, and the stories of how contagious the virus is seemed unreal. Throughout the month of February, more news about the virus outbreak started to take shape how serious the situation was, and we had to make the difficult decision to cancel the in-person portion of the Contributor Summit in Gothenburg. There was quite a financial penalty to this cancellation, and we also did our best to help community members who were unable to cancel their travel arrangements. We had to make some major changes virtually overnight. While we've had an online component in our previous Contributor Summit, how would a fully virtual event look like? What platforms should we use? How do we make it engaging without being in person? Which time zone should we host it in now that a number of speakers and attendees who were planning to fly over from the US will be 8 hours behind instead? It was definitely a hard pivot. This was back in March when lockdowns were happening around the world, although some are happening again, and all of us were trying to adjust to doing everything virtually, from working to schooling, from grocery shopping to attending events. Some were definitely more challenging than others. I explored some virtual platforms, but decided to stick with something familiar. By the way, I would love to have a chat with Tobias and Anne-Marie about this Brella platform. I've used it once previously, but only as a networking tool at a physical event. Anyway, we have been using BlueJeans video conferencing for our previous events, for the online parts, and now for a full virtual event. If the tool you have previously used is suitable for your event, the familiarity brings some comfort. In addition, for us, BlueJeans is fully supported by Red Hat IT. So also we made sure that tools are accessible to as many people as possible. For example, it's OS, cross-platform and browser-based. The upside is that everyone is on more equal footing, whereas sometimes in a face-to-face event, the online audience may feel less integrated in the event. We wanted to keep the interactive feel of an in-person event, so we used the meeting feature where everyone can chime in when they want to instead of doing a one-to-many broadcast. This works well for the participating group size we had in March. As for the schedule, we started, instead of starting at 9 in the morning, Central European time, which Gothenburg is in, we shifted it to start at 1 in the afternoon so that we could accommodate the participants across the pond who were not able to travel to be in the same time zone. As the event As one of the event hosts, I also made sure that I had my camera on and showed my face whenever possible. This helps with making people feel more present and connected. Encourage your attendees to do the same if possible, but don't make it mandatory. I think the March event can be considered a success, given the constraints. However, a successful event is by no means a perfect event. We sent out a survey after the Contributor Summit and received some valuable feedback. In general, we had pretty positive ratings for the presentations, technology, and accessibility of the event. Some had problems with the event being held on a Sunday, since it's different when you're traveling to an event versus when you're attending from home with family and other obligations. Suggestions for a better organized agenda was also mentioned, and I agree that having things more structured is crucial for an online event, or rather for something that's in a completely new format and arrangement. This will help set the right expectations. Excuse me. After having the positive vibes from the first fully virtual Ansible Contributor Summit, we decided to make it more regular, taking advantage of the online format. In the second edition, we had more people attend, and I'll share some numbers in just a minute. We kept the format roughly the same as the previous event, since most of it worked fine. Although we changed the event stay from Sunday to a Monday. We stayed in between US and European time zone, as we anticipated that the following Contributor Summit, which was last week, would be in the US Eastern time. As we had people join in throughout the day, we did several rounds of introductions, which I would encourage if you have a manageable group size to do that. We did the presentations live and monitored BlueJeans chat and IRC channels for questions, just like we're doing here. For some topics, we had more of a discussion format where everyone can just turn on their microphone and speak up. Once again, we sent out a survey after the July Contributor Summit. By the way, these prettier and fancier graphs are thanks to Greg Sutcliffe, the data scientist in our team. In any case, the NPS score is still quite high from the second virtual summit, but in the free comment section, we received mixed feedback about the unconference format, which we were trying out to facilitate more engagement and discussions. I guess it's not too surprising that an online conference is even more challenging. Online unconference format is even more challenging, given the feedback about agenda structure in the previous one. All right, numbers. Here are the attendance numbers from the Contributor Summits. I think prior to 2019, we had around 40 to 60 people at these summits. I don't have the exact numbers as I've only led the event planning from this year. It was a nice surprise to have close to 100 people show up last year in Atlanta. And even though earlier this year we went back to around 50 to 70 range, we were encouraged by the level of engagement that maintained throughout the day, which was a lot harder than online than if you're in person. For the March event in Gothenburg, we ended up with only 30 registrations in the midst of Corona news. But at the end, 50 attended the virtual event. For the July event, we went back to more than 100 registrations and 70 people showed up. When I gave this talk last week, I wasn't able to provide the numbers for the third Contributor Summit of 2020. In fact, I was expecting to replicate the event from the earlier two editions this year. However, we received overwhelming interest from people who registered for Ansible Fest. Based on the interest, we had to pivot once again with a different format. We ended up with 2 days of content. The first targeted towards new contributors and the second for regular and seasoned contributors. We used BlueJeans Prime Time, which is more of a broadcast format for larger audiences, as the meeting format could only accommodate 150 participants. At the end of the 2 days, over 700 attendees from 67 countries showed up. That's about 10 times the previous event. Of course, 10 times the attendance does not mean 10 times the participation. We are still analyzing the event's data, such as frequency of chat and questions, and there will be a post-event survey going out this week. We'll share our findings in our newsletter, The Bullhorn, with the link there. But based on polls during the event and preliminary feedback, it seemed to be pretty well received. Now, for something to incentivize participants. If you're still here with me, or if you happen to watch a playback of this within a week, email me at carol.chen@redhat.com before October 28, 2020. In the email, mention that you saw this on slide 15 with a short comment or feedback about Ansible, or perhaps what you liked about open source automation days. The first 15 responses I received, we in turn receive a pair of Ansible socks. As for this t-shirt on the slide, it is especially for some of our contributors who attended the Contributor Summit. Can't say anyone. We hope that the interest and contributions keep up, and we will be happy to show our appreciation with more goodies in the future. While events like Ansible Fest and Ansible Contributor Summit provide an opportunity for our global user and contributor communities to get together, meetups serve an important purpose in building local communities in different cities, regions, and also in various languages. Contributions can come in many forms other than code, and organizing meetups is one of these ways. We have numerous meetup groups around the world, and many, if not most, of them are led by community members, including the one in Munich. As with conferences and summits, most meetups have gone virtual since around March this year. There was certainly an initial period of, what do we do now? Maybe we'll wait and see and resume meetups in a couple of months. But I think we all realized quickly that in-person meetups won't be happening again anytime soon, and we might as well make the best of the situation, especially when knowledge sharing and networking is so much a part of who we are in the community. Between the March and September equinoxes, we see that in 2019, there were 83 Ansible meetups. This year, the number is 60 in the same period. After the initial drop due to the COVID-19, meetup pace has picked up again in the past couple of months. Some sponsors that used to provide venues and snacks now share their virtual conferencing platforms. The familiar faces of a local group might now include a few new ones from different parts of the world. We will continue to assist local meetup groups, but I think for the most part, they have made the transition really well. I could do a separate talk on meetups. Oh wait, I did. If you're interested, take a look at this YouTube video of my talk, Connect and Grow Your Community Through Meetups. I gave this at the Open Source Summit in North America. Well, it was online instead of in Austin. As we go forward, I do wonder when we will be able to resume physical face-to-face events. I miss those terribly. However, I also find that virtual events such as this provide new opportunities to connect. And as long as we have the desire to establish and stay connected, we will find ways to do so. Try different tools and formats, fail many times along the way, and learn from it all. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to take questions and comments.